My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 38 years old. And I didn't know my relationship was already collapsing when my boyfriend looked at me and said something that sounded less like a request and more like a verdict. Choose, he said. Me or your brother. It was after the kids went to bed. The house was quiet in that artificial way it always is after bedtime. Dishwasher humming, nightlight glowing in the hallway, the soft creak of the floor as someone shifts in their sleep. I actually laughed at first. Not because it was funny, because my brain refused to process it. Choose what? I asked. Between what and what? He didn't smile. I'm done sharing you, he said evenly. I can't live like this anymore. That was the moment my stomach dropped. We had been together for 7 years. Not married, but committed in every way that mattered. Shared finances, shared kids, shared routines so deeply intertwined that separating them felt unthinkable. We had 2 children, 5 and 3. A life built on repetition and assumed permanence. And now he was asking me to amputate a part of it. What are you talking about? I said. Sharing me with who? He exhaled like he'd rehearsed this. Your brother, he said. He's always there, always involved. Every holiday, every birthday, every decision. I'm tired of competing. I stared at him. Competing. My younger brother, Daniel, is my only sibling. Our parents died when we were young. Our father first, then our mother 2 years ago, after a brutal fight with cancer. Daniel and I had survived each other. We were close, yes, but not in any way that crossed boundaries. We texted a few times a week, had dinner once a month. He was godfather to my oldest. That was it. He's my brother, I said slowly. What do you mean, competing? You always run to him, my boyfriend snapped. Before me. You tell him things before you tell me. He's too involved. That's not true, I said automatically. It is, he insisted, and I'm done pretending it's normal. There was something in his tone that unsettled me. Not anger, certainty. Either he goes, he said, or I do. The words hung there, heavy and unreal. That's an impossible choice, I said finally. I'm not cutting off my brother. That's insane. He nodded once, tight-lipped. Then I guess we know where your priorities are. He slept in the guest room that night. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. Made coffee, packed lunches, kissed the kids goodbye, asked me if I'd remembered to RSVP to a birthday party next weekend. It was like the conversation had never existed. I told myself maybe he'd had a bad day. Maybe something else was eating at him, and my brother had become an easy target. Couples fight. Ultimatums get thrown around sometimes. We'd move past it. Except I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The demand had come out of nowhere. There had been no slow build, no arguments leading up to it, no obvious tension between him and Daniel. They'd always gotten along, or so I thought. Not close, but polite, civil. No raised voices, no cold shoulders. So why now? The next day, I called my brother. I didn't accuse, I didn't panic, I just asked. Did something happen between you and him? I said. Anything I should know about? There was a pause. A long one. Can we meet in person? Daniel asked finally. The way he said it, careful, measured, made my chest tighten. Why? I asked. There's something I need to tell you, he said, and it's not a phone conversation. We met that Saturday at a coffee shop near his office. Daniel looked off. My brother doesn't get rattled. He's a corporate accountant. Audits, financial investigations, forensic reviews. Numbers don't scare him. But that day, his hands were tense around his cup. I found something, he said. About what? I asked. About your boyfriend. My heart skipped. I wasn't looking, he continued quickly. It fell into my lap while I was finishing Mom's estate work. That was when I felt the first real flicker of fear, because our mother's estate had been complicated. Multiple accounts, investments, life insurance. Daniel had handled most of it because he understood that world. What did you find? I asked. He slid a folder across the table, and just like that, the life I thought I understood began to fracture. Daniel didn't let go of the folder when he slid it toward me. His fingers stayed on the edge, knuckles pale, like he was bracing for the moment my eyes hit the page and something in me broke. I remember looking at him instead of the documents first, because my brother, my steady, numbers-first brother, looked like he'd been carrying a weight too heavy for one person to hold. Evelyn, he said quietly, before you read any of that, you need to promise me you'll breathe. That was such a strange thing to ask. I forced a laugh that came out thin. Daniel, you're scaring me. I'm trying not to, he said, but I can't sugarcoat it. My hands hovered over the folder like it might bite. Finally, I opened it. Bank statements, transfer records, a printed timeline with dates highlighted in yellow, a neat paper trail that screamed exactly what Daniel always screamed in his work. Truth lives in the numbers. At first, it didn't make sense, just lines. amounts, account numbers blurred by security blocks. Then I saw it. A transfer. $20,000. My breath caught. My mother's inheritance. The amount wasn't random. It wasn't approximate. It was exact. Down to the dollar, down to the date. I stared, waiting for my brain to reject it as some misunderstanding. Daniel, my voice sounded far away. What is this? He didn't answer right away. He watched me the way people watch someone standing too close to a ledge. A few months ago, he said, I was closing the last of Mom's accounts. You remember how probate dragged on forever? I nodded slowly. The probate process had been a long, exhausting blur. Death certificates, phone calls, signatures, lawyers, the endless reminder that our mother was gone. I noticed a discrepancy, he continued, a big one. What kind of discrepancy? I asked, already knowing I didn't want the answer. There was supposed to be $400,000 in Mom's main investment account, Daniel said. Split between us. We each got $200,000. Right, I whispered. I remember. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. Do you remember where yours went? My savings, I said automatically. We put it away. Daniel's eyes didn't move. Did you verify that? He asked. Something cold slid down my spine. What are you saying? I demanded. But it didn't come out strong. It came out shaky, like my body was already losing the argument before my mind caught up. Daniel tapped a page in the folder. 3 weeks before Mom died, he said, your boyfriend opened a separate account. My throat went tight. Not a joint account, he added. Not one you're listed on. It's in his name only. I blinked hard. No, I said, that can't be. Daniel didn't flinch. He just kept going. The inheritance deposit hit your personal account first, he said. Same as mine. Your half was deposited on March 15th. My stomach churned as he pointed to the next line. And within 48 hours, he said, it was transferred out. I felt dizzy. Transferred where? Daniel's voice was flat now. Professional. Like he was reading off a report because emotion would drown him if he didn't cling to structure. Into that private account, he said. I stared at the paper again. At the date. At the amount. $200,000. My mother's money. Money she'd saved her whole life, penny by penny, while working overtime and clipping coupons and acting like she didn't need anything from anyone. Gone. Not spent, not stolen by a stranger. Moved. Quietly. By the man who kissed my kids goodnight. My fingers shook so badly the paper fluttered. How did he even, my voice cracked, how did he even have access to my personal account? Daniel's jaw tightened. That's the part I couldn't understand at first, he admitted. But the more I looked, the more it made sense. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? He had your login, Daniel said simply. Or he had access to your phone. Or you were already sharing access without realizing the consequences. I felt sick, because it wasn't impossible. We'd been together for 7 years. We had kids, a shared life. We used each other's phones sometimes without thinking. We'd saved passwords. Trusted. Assumed. I'd never imagined that trust could be weaponized. Why would he do this? I whispered. Daniel's eyes dropped for a moment. I don't know, he said honestly, but I can tell you what happened after I noticed the discrepancy. I looked up, and something in his expression made my heart beat faster. 2 months ago, Daniel said, I started asking questions. Quietly. Just verifying records. Making sure I hadn't missed something. And? I asked. And 3 days after I started digging, he said, he confronted me. My skin prickled. He confronted you? I repeated. About what? Daniel let out a slow breath, the kind people take before saying something that still makes them angry. He told me, Daniel said, to stay out of things that don't concern me. My hands tightened around the folder. I started, then stopped because my mouth couldn't keep up with my emotions. Daniel continued. I told him I was going to talk to you, he said, because if I found a legitimate issue, you deserve to know. I stared at him, heart hammering, and that's when he threatened me. The word hit like a slap. Threatened you how? I asked. Daniel's voice lowered again, quieter now, not because he was being dramatic, but because the memory still tasted bitter. He said if I told you anything, Daniel said, he would make sure I never saw the kids again. My breath caught. That doesn't even, I began. You're their uncle. He can't. He also said, Daniel added, that he'd tell you I was obsessed with you. I froze. Daniel's mouth tightened like he hated every syllable. He said he'd tell you I was trying to break up your relationship, he continued, that I was jealous of him, that I'd always wanted you to myself. A cold, slow horror settled in my chest. Because suddenly, the ultimatum made sense. It wasn't about boundaries. It wasn't about sharing me. It was about removing the one person who had seen the truth. I stared down at the folder again, at the paper trail, and something inside me shifted, Not just sadness, not just betrayal. The realization that my boyfriend had planned this. Planned the theft. Planned the secrecy. Planned the smear campaign. And when his secret was threatened, he didn't confess. He didn't negotiate. He went nuclear. I sat back in the booth, trying to breathe like Daniel told me. 7 years. 2 kids. A life I thought was built on trust, on partnership. And all along, he'd been quietly building himself a safety net. With my dead mother's money. My voice came out small. "What do I do?" I asked. Daniel's eyes softened, not with pity, but with something like grief. "That's up to you," he said gently. "But you needed to know, and I'm sorry." "Don't apologize," I said immediately, too sharp, because the idea of blaming him made me angry. "You're the only person who told me the truth." Daniel's hand reached across the table, briefly squeezing my fingers. "I was afraid you wouldn't believe me," he admitted. I looked at him and my throat tightened. "That's what he wanted," I whispered. Daniel nodded. "That's why he threatened me," he said. "He wanted you to think I was the problem, not him." I sat there for a long time, staring at the folder like it might rearrange itself into a lie if I looked hard enough. But it didn't. Numbers don't lie. People do. When I finally stood to leave, my legs felt unsteady. I hugged Daniel outside the coffee shop, and it was the first time since Mom died that I felt that specific kind of loneliness, the kind that isn't about being physically alone, but about realizing the person beside you isn't who you thought they were. Driving home, I kept replaying the ultimatum in my head. Choose me or your brother. It wasn't a test of love. It was a test of control, and I hadn't even known I was being tested. That night, I didn't say a word. I kissed my kids goodnight, tucked them in, smiled like everything was normal. Then I waited until the house was quiet again. And I opened my laptop, because if Daniel was right, I needed to see it myself. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed beside him, listening to the familiar rhythm of his breathing, staring at the ceiling while my mind replayed Daniel's words on a loop. 3 weeks before Mom died, 48 hours after the deposit, a private account in his name only. Every time I closed my eyes, the numbers surfaced again. Clean, precise, unforgiving. Sometime around 2:30 a.m., I slipped out of bed. The house felt different in the dark, less safe, like the walls had been listening all along. I took my laptop into the kitchen, sat at the table where we'd eaten dinner together 1,000 times, and logged into my bank account. At first, everything looked normal. Checking, savings, joint household account. Balances I recognized. Then I searched. Not by name. By date, March 15th. And there it was, a deposit. $20,000. My inheritance. My mother's final gift. I scrolled. 2 days later, a transfer. Outgoing. The destination account number was partially masked, but I didn't need to see the whole thing. I already knew where it went. My hands started shaking. I copied the number, opened a new tab, cross-referenced the routing information. A different bank, not one we used. I swallowed hard and kept going. I searched my email next. Keywords: account, bank, confirmation, alert. Nothing. No notifications, no warnings, no accidental slip-ups. He hadn't just moved the money. He'd made sure I never saw it. My chest felt tight as realization settled in. This wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, careful, planned. I logged out and sat there in silence, staring at the dark window over the sink. 7 years. I thought back to the man I'd fallen in love with, attentive, charming, supportive in that steady, practical way that felt safe. The kind of man who showed up to school events, who knew the kids' schedules, who talked about our future like it was a shared project. And now I wondered how much of that had been real. Because once you see a lie this big, everything else starts to wobble. The next morning, he kissed my cheek like always. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked casually, pouring coffee. "Fine," I said. It was the first lie I told him, and it tasted strange in my mouth. Over the next week, I watched him, really watched him. The way he checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he brushed off conversations about money. The casual confidence with which he spent. Never flashy, but just enough that I'd always assumed we were comfortable. Now I noticed things I'd dismissed before. The expensive skincare products in the bathroom cabinet he'd claimed were on sale. The designer bag he said his mother had gifted him. The spa days he paid for in cash. Little things. Too many little things. I started documenting. Screenshots of bank records, copies of statements, dates, times. I opened a private cloud folder and uploaded everything. It felt surreal, like I was spying on my own life. Midweek, while he was at work, I sat in my car outside a law office I'd found online. I almost drove away. Because walking in meant accepting that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It meant acknowledging that my relationship might already be over. But then I thought of my mother, of Daniel, Of my kids. And I went inside. The attorney was calm, sharp, efficient. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything: the inheritance, the transfer, the secret account, the ultimatum. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This is serious," she said. I nodded. I figured. "Inheritance is generally considered separate property," she continued, "especially if it never touched joint accounts." "He transferred it within 48 hours, I said, "before it could." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "That matters," she said. "A lot." "What are my options?" I asked. "That depends on what you want," she replied. "You could pursue criminal charges, fraud, or theft. But because he had access to your account and you were in a long-term partnership, that can get complicated." I swallowed. "And otherwise?" "If you pursue this through separation or divorce," she said carefully, "you have a strong case for financial recovery. And more importantly, it establishes a pattern of deception and manipulation." My stomach tightened. "Which affects custody," I said quietly. She nodded. "Yes." I left her office feeling heavier, but clearer. That night, he suggested dinner at his parents' house. "I think it's time we clear the air," he said lightly, "about your brother." My pulse spiked. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I've talked to my mom," he said. "She agrees your relationship with him is unhealthy." Unhealthy. The word landed like a calculated blow. "They're worried about us," he continued, "about how much strain this is putting on our family." I realized then what he was doing. He was building a narrative, one where I was the problem, one where Daniel was the threat, one where his theft disappeared behind concern and boundary talk and worried relatives. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said, "let's have dinner." His face relaxed, just a fraction. He thought he was winning. That night, after he fell asleep, I called Daniel. "They're trying to isolate me," I said quietly. "Turn everyone against you before I say anything." Daniel was silent for a moment. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I stared at the dark ceiling, feeling something cold and steady settle into place. "I'm going to let him think he's winning," I said. And then, I replied, "I'm going to blow this wide open. Because the thing about lies built on control is this: they collapse the moment the truth gets a microphone." Sunday came faster than I expected. By the time we pulled into his parents' driveway, my nerves were quiet. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because fear had burned itself out and left something colder behind. Focus. That's what I kept telling myself. The house was already full when we walked in. His mother, his father, his older brother, an aunt I barely knew. They were seated like a panel, drinks already poured, voices hushed in that conspiratorial way people use when they believe they're about to do something important. Something righteous. My boyfriend squeezed my hand. Too tight. "I'm glad you came," his mother said, smiling warmly. "We're worried about you." I nodded politely. Concern is such a useful disguise. We sat. "I'll just say it," my boyfriend began, standing like he was about to give a presentation. "This has been hurting our relationship for a long time." I watched him carefully as he spoke. The practiced pauses, the softened language, the way every sentence had been designed to sound reasonable. He's talking about my brother, I thought, but he never said Daniel's name at first. He talked instead about boundaries, about emotional availability, about putting your partner first. His family nodded along. "You've seemed distant," his mother said gently, "like your heart is somewhere else." His brother leaned forward. "Your partner should come first, always." "She does," I said calmly, "but my brother is still my family." "That's the problem," my boyfriend said softly. "He's always there. Holidays, birthdays, decisions. I never get space." "He's their uncle," I said. "He sees them once a month." "That's not the point," his aunt chimed in. "Sometimes emotional closeness can cross lines without people realizing it." I felt my jaw tighten. This was the story he'd been telling. A carefully curated version where I was naive, Daniel was intrusive, and he was the patient, suffering partner. Then my boyfriend turned to me. "I just need to know," he said quietly, "that you're willing to choose our relationship." There it was again, the choice. I took a breath. "I agree," I said. "We need clarity." His eyes lit up, just for a second. "I'm glad," he said. "That's why I asked Daniel to come today, so we can all talk openly." The front door opened. Daniel stepped inside. He looked tense but composed, same as always. Then, 2 steps behind him, the estate lawyer walked in. "Sorry I'm late," he said pleasantly. "Traffic." Every head turned. My boyfriend froze. "What is this?" he asked, voice tight. "This," I said calmly, standing, "is the attorney who handled my mother's estate." Silence swallowed the room. "I thought," I continued, "since we're having a family meeting about family issues, it would be helpful to have him clarify something." My boyfriend's face drained of color. "What are you doing?" he hissed. I didn't answer him. Instead, I opened my bag and placed a familiar folder on the coffee table. The same one Daniel had slid across the cafe table weeks earlier. I spread the documents out slowly. 2 years ago, I said evenly, I inherited $200,000 from my mother. His mother frowned. Yes, we know that. That money, I continued, was supposed to go into my savings. I looked directly at my boyfriend. It didn't. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Instead, I said, it was transferred, without my knowledge, into a private account in his name only. The lawyer spoke then, voice calm and authoritative. The funds were deposited into Evelyn's personal account on March 15th, he said. Within 48 hours, they were moved to an account registered solely to her partner. He handed copies to the nearest person. My boyfriend's mother picked them up. Her hands shook. Is this real? She asked, turning to her son. My boyfriend stammered. That's not what it looks like. Then what does it look like? I asked quietly. It was for emergencies, he said quickly, for our family. Then why didn't I know about it? I asked. Why was it hidden? Why was it in your name only? I was protecting us, he snapped. From what? I asked. Transparency? His brother stood up. Look, couples share money. This was inheritance, the lawyer interrupted calmly. Legally separate property. The room went dead quiet. My boyfriend's aunt spoke for the first time. Is this why you wanted her brother gone? She asked slowly. Because he figured it out? My boyfriend didn't answer. He couldn't. The truth had nowhere left to hide. You didn't want boundaries, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. You wanted silence. His mother stood abruptly. You took her mother's money? She demanded, without telling her. Tears spilled down his face. I was scared, he said weakly. I didn't know if we'd last. I needed security. So you stole from me, I said. It wasn't stealing. It was my inheritance, I said sharply. And you hid it for 2 years. Then you tried to isolate me from my family to keep it secret. The room began to clear quickly after that. No shouting, no dramatics. Just the quiet collapse of a story no one believed anymore. In the car afterward, Daniel exhaled hard. That was intense. It's not over, I said. But for the first time in weeks, everyone knew the truth. The fallout didn't explode. It leaked. Slowly, quietly, in ways that were somehow more exhausting than shouting ever could be. The week after the intervention, my boyfriend tried to pretend none of it had happened. He made breakfast, folded laundry, asked if I wanted to watch a show together after the kids went to bed. The audacity of it was almost impressive. I watched him move through our house like a guest overstaying his welcome, touching things that no longer belonged to him in the way he thought they did. I didn't confront him. Not yet, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was strategic. I followed my attorney's advice to the letter. I documented everything. Screenshots of the account, time-stamped, copies of the transfer records, notes about conversations, a private journal tracking his behavior, especially anything involving the kids. When I told him I'd spoken to a lawyer, he laughed. About what? He asked, genuinely amused. Our finances, I said. His smile faltered, just slightly. You're overreacting, he said. This is something couples work through. No, I replied calmly. This is something courts work through. That was the moment the mask cracked. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He shifted tactics. Suddenly, the story changed. The secret account wasn't secret anymore. It was practical. The transfer wasn't theft. It was management. The ultimatum wasn't control. It was self-respect. His lawyer echoed the same arguments. They claimed the inheritance had become marital property because we'd been together so long. They argued he'd acted in our family's best interest. They painted him as the primary emotional support for the kids. It might have worked, if not for the evidence. During the first hearing, the judge flipped through the documents in silence. Then he looked up. Did you transfer these funds without your partner's knowledge or consent? He asked. My boyfriend hesitated. I was handling our finances. That wasn't the question, the judge said evenly. Did you do it without her knowledge? Yes. And did you keep the account in your name only for nearly 2 years? Yes. The judge nodded once. That's all I needed. The financial ruling came quickly. The entire account, now sitting at $217,000 after interest, was ordered returned to me as separate property. But that wasn't the worst part for him, because deception doesn't stay neatly in the finance column. It bleeds. The custody evaluator's report was devastating. They noted his attempts to isolate me from family, the threats made toward Daniel, the manipulation of extended relatives, the pattern of secrecy. The evaluator used the word coercive, joint legal custody. But I was awarded primary residential custody, a 60-40 split in my favor. When the judge announced it, my boyfriend lost control. This is about money, he shouted in the hallway afterward. You're taking my kids because of money. I turned to him calmly. No, I said, I'm protecting them from lies. His face went white. He hadn't expected that answer. The weeks after the ruling were brutal. He sent messages accusing me of ruining his life, of turning everyone against him, of choosing my brother over him. I didn't reply. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, because the truth was simple. Even if he refused to see it, he didn't lose because of me. He lost because his entire relationship was built on misdirection. And once a court sees that, there's no performance convincing enough to undo it. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic day, no storms, no symbolic timing, just a regular weekday with traffic and errands, and a calendar reminder that popped up on my phone like it was any other appointment. Finalized dissolution, 10:30 a.m. I remember sitting in my car afterward, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, waiting for something to hit me. Relief, grief, triumph. Instead, what I felt was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long alarm finally shuts off. The financial part was clean. The judge ordered the full $217,000, my mother's money, plus interest, returned to me as separate property. The asset split favored me because of the documented deception. No appeals, no ambiguity. The money went exactly where it should have gone in the first place. College funds, emergency savings, stability. My mother would have approved. Custody was harder. The kids didn't understand why their world had split in two, why bedtime happened in different houses, why their dad wasn't always there when they woke up. I didn't badmouth him. I never will. Sometimes grown-ups decide to live in different houses, I told them gently, but we both love you very much. My therapist helped me find those words. Words that didn't lie, but didn't wound. He didn't show the same restraint. The kids came home from his weekends with questions. Daddy says you were mean to him. Daddy says Uncle Daniel is bad. Why does Uncle Daniel come over if Daddy doesn't like him? I documented everything, because patterns matter. Daniel has been my anchor through all of this. He helped me find our new apartment, watched the kids during court dates, handled school pickups when my work ran late. He's the emergency contact now. Everything my ex tried to take from me, family, trust, stability, Daniel helped rebuild. Ironically, his family stepped back after the intervention. His mother sent a single text. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I never replied, but I appreciated the honesty. His brother called later, apologized, said they'd been fed a very different story. I told him I understood, because I had lived inside that story for 7 years. The last message my ex sent me was short and venomous. Your brother won. I hope you're happy being married to him instead. I didn't respond. Some people can't see past their own projection. Here's what I learned. Trust is not blindness. Love does not require ignorance. And boundaries are meaningless when they're only enforced in one direction. My ex wanted me to choose between him and my brother. In the end, he made the choice for me. He chose secrecy. He chose control. He chose theft. And by doing so, he chose to lose. The kids are adjusting. Our apartment is starting to feel like home. I'm not thinking about dating or revenge or rewriting the past. I'm thinking about showing up, about being present, about teaching my children, quietly, by example, that love doesn't demand silence and family doesn't disappear when it becomes inconvenient. This chapter is closed, not with anger, but with clarity.